Yeah, well, I mean, they were like after the Cold War never ended. All right, that's not a rage quit for you. Good. I guess we've heard too much about that. But I mean, yeah, just there was so much like, okay, we're at the end of history. There's countries aren't going to invade each other. We're done. Things are good. Nobody really in the West wanted to acknowledge like, well, there are still really aggressive authoritarian states that have ambitions that don't jive with the international.
So I think also because in 1991 or whatever, like when the Berlin Wall fell, when the Soviet Union started to break up in the early 90s, China wasn't that like powerful of a country.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Reflected in the white paper on Taiwan.
Yeah. Now, do you remember when Russia invaded Crimea in 2014?
Oh, I don't.
Because I don't remember it.
I don't have to remember anything.
Yeah. Like, what international reaction? It was just Russia reclaiming part of Russia from if you try to like look back at that, there was like a bit of media outrage and then resuming normal relations with Russia.
What was going on in 2014? Like what was the big story back then? I don't remember.
I think
no, that was so long ago.
Remember the Obama administration, and I think Hillary Clinton in particular, as Secretary of State a couple years earlier, had tried to do a Russia reset, right?
That was significantly earlier than that was like 2008.
That was Obama's first term.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, like there was this idea that the U.S. could kind of, reset relations with Russia and treat Russia like a normal country, a normal democracy, and not like a, Putin dictatorship. And it didn't.
I'm sorry,
make
Matt.
Russia democratic.
I got to know what Shelley.
Oh, I laughed because I looked up what happened in 2014, and one of the things that happened was the Sochi Olympics, which I can't believe. I forgot because that's when it happened, right? Like
yeah. The doping Olympics. We found out they were all doping Olympics.
But the Sochi Olympics specifically, that's when Putin did his little strategic military operation.
Yeah. But yeah, I think, but that is a very good point. Like the invasion of Crimea should have sparked something, but for some reason it was Ukraine, where like people finally were like, oh gosh, something like this can happen in the 21st century.
Yeah, but what's the difference between taking a part of Ukraine and taking the entire Ukraine?
I think there is a difference because, when Biden was asked about prior to the invasion of Ukraine, like the U.S. had been kind of saying that Russia is going to do something, right? And then there was a question asked to Biden at a press conference about what would the reaction to that be. And Biden was kind of like, well, it depends on what they do.
Depends how much of Ukraine
he didn't say that specifically, but he said something about a minor incursion, which essentially I think a lot of people expected them to try to get the Donbas region, essentially like do like a small, like what they did in Crimea, like take a small part and not like go straight for Kyiv. So I think that was, if you think about that in terms of China and Taiwan, it would be like
taking Jinmen.
Yeah, taking Jinmen or Matsu or some of the outlying islands, or maybe taking their island in the South China Sea. Like, what would the international reaction to that be?
Probably pretty tepid.
Well, I mean, the international reaction to the CCP trying to take Jinmen in the 1950s.
Well, that was the first
60s.
and second Taiwan Straits crisis.
That's a good point. When Americans knew the threat of communism.
and we supported Taiwan in fighting the Red Terror.
Was it Eisenhower? Did he like threaten to nuke China? Am I making that up?
That wasn't.
I'm pretty sure that was our YouTube commentators.
No. I'm trying to remember if there was a threat of.
Eisenhower wasn't.
I might be wrong.
No. I'm not sure.
Well, too many. I have forgotten more things about China than most people ever learned.
But at any rate, like, what would happen if today the PRC tried to take over one of those outlying islands that are administered by the Republic of China, i.e. Taiwan? Like,
it's a really good question. And also, I think a lot of it depends on when they would make that move. like right now, like with the context of Ukraine, I think people would be more outraged. What happens if it's 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 7 years from now? What will people care about then?
Yeah, I mean, you can also imagine that like the Chinese Communist Party has had quite a bit of success with salami slicing over the last decade or so.
Explain that.
So the salami slicing is when
That was my Larry King.
Okay, I was wondering.
Going for it, yeah. So basically, instead of doing one big takeover of Taiwan or India or the South China Sea, they just do little by little by little by little, and each individual step seems small enough that to react to that might seem like an overreaction because everything is a sort of short of war tactic.
I mean, there was a reaction, but it was often like not. It was often a reaction that was
wagging.
like, yes, finger wagging.
Finger wagging and not on the level of what the PRC had done. So, like, they salami slice into the South China Sea gradually, right, bit by bit. So first they draw the 9-dash line and say it's been part of Chinese territory since ancient times. And they, come up with some old maps and okay, fine. The people are like, oh, well, that's not true, but it doesn't really matter because they're not doing anything there.
You don't want to have a war over a fake map.
Right. It doesn't matter, right? And then, they started to move some ships in to some of those islands and shoals. Okay, but like not a big deal. They start to fill them in with sand and build up the area, but it's like what, like it's not. They say they're not going to militarize. They promise Obama in the Rose Garden. Xi Jinping says we're not going to militarize.
I've been to that Rose Garden. It's lovely, and they have photos of that meeting all over the place.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? And it's like, well, okay, look, if you promise you're not going to militarize, then it doesn't seem like that big a deal. Like, what kind of reaction should we have to just like, doing this? Maybe it's for commercial reasons, whatever. And then they start to militarize, and that definitely should have been a part where there's a big reaction, but they also kind of did that gradually. There was no big announcement.
Of course not. I mean, basically people found like we're taking satellite images and they're like, okay, this looks like a hangar.
But at this point, like, what are you going to do? Because there's already a big Chinese presence there. So if you
and they've previously moved civilians onto that island.
Right. Yeah. And so once there's civilians there, you can't just bomb it. And of course, bombing it anyway would be, from the PRC's perspective, an act of war. Right. So they're putting civilians there, and then military facilities is not, from their perspective, an act of war, but a reaction to that would be an act of war. So they kind of set this up where they can gradually do what they want, but any reaction that the U.S. or foreign countries have is an extreme overreaction that would then trigger a war between China and the U.S. So we're like, America is always falling for this trap because we don't do reactions big enough to deal with each slice of the salami.
I think it's also that we don't have a good like proactive policy for certain things. Like, it's very reactive, right?
Right.
Well, I think what's interesting is like this salami slicing strategy is something the U.S. can adopt as well, and maybe they are to an extent. Like, China, threatens all kinds of war if the U.S. supports Taiwan. Well, the U.S. sends some congressmen to Taiwan. Well, that's not a big deal. They can't like have a war over that. They can't actually pull the trigger on invasion. Oh, now it's Nancy Pelosi who's visiting Taiwan. Well, that's a bigger escalation, but that's, still you don't want to actually do the invasion just because of that.
I mean, also they can't, right?
And they can, yeah. So, like, if the U.S. keeps doing like these little progressions, like, okay, now, well, what's next after? This is what the State Department should be thinking of. What's next after Nancy Pelosi? Maybe station some troops there, or have an aircraft carrier dock. There can be this gradual kind of progression of U.S. support for Taiwan that never triggers a response.
I think the fact that there have been Marines on there, just a few that came out, and then like the CCP was upset, but then they couldn't do anything about it.
Exactly.
When we had Guermont Leilari on, he suggested, well, maybe this year it could be 10, maybe next year it could be 100. Like, like kind of what you're talking about, this like gradual build-up kind of scenario.